Welcome to Beginning Ham Radio. We are sponsored by the Portland Amateur Radio Club. And this week, we're going to be talking about operating in other countries. So operating in other countries is a big topic, and it's mostly gray area. It is not well defined. It's hard to find information. So what I'll do is on the next few slides, I'm just going to go through some high level, like this is what's out there. But if you're really interested in going to a country, it's best to do research on your own before you go. And I would definitely plan to do research 5 to 7 months before you go, because sometimes depending on which country you go to, they will require an operating permit. And sometimes you have to get documents translated into the language that the country uses and mail them to the equivalent FCC. And sometimes you have to pay a pretty hefty a fee, I guess you would call it, for a license that lasts anywhere from a month to 6 months to a year. So do the research first, and also see kind of if it's worth it or not. But in general, there's a couple places that is very easy to operate in. Number one is Canada. We have a reciprocal operating agreement with Canada that allows you to basically bring all of your ham radio gear up there or use other people's gear in Canada. And all you need to carry with you is your FCC license and some type of proof of your US citizenship, whether it's a birth certificate, a passport. You don't need to apply in advance. And really all you need to do is identify as your call with a slash and then the Canadian identifier. And so the example that they have on this page here is N1KB/VE3. And at the bottom, I put a map of the different provinces of Canada and their call sign prefix. So VA7, VY1, and even they even have an identifier for international waters up in Canada. So very easy. And Canadians also can come down here and operate. Just remember when you operate in Canada that you just have to add the slash and then the geographic location prefix. So operating in Mexico, that's all I got. So yeah, you used to be able to operate in Mexico probably 12 to 15 years ago. Anymore, you just can't. We technically have a reciprocal agreement, so anybody that is a Mexican citizen can come up to the US and operate. I don't know exactly if they have to like use a slash and then a location identifier, but for US citizens going down to Mexico, it used to be that you would pay about $130 for a permit that lasted about 3 months, which would kind of give you enough time to go down there on your vacation. But about 10 to 12 years ago, they had a big change in amateur radio licensing. And so I'm not even sure that they are licensing Mexican citizens anymore as amateur radio operators. It's unfortunate because there are a lot of vacation destinations in Mexico. And people, like myself, would love to go down there, bring my radio and operate, but it's just, as far as I know, not possible. And I've done quite a bit of research, but you can look on the internet and see that there's a lot of people that there's just no information out there. So operating in the EU, we're very fortunate to be able to operate in the EU through the Conference of Postal Telecommunications Administration. So the CEPT agreement, it allows US amateurs to travel to most of the EU without obtaining an additional license or a permit. So you can activate this reciprocal operating authority by carrying credentials in English, French, and German. That the person, if a US citizen and a commission authorized amateur operator, which you would be authorized by the FCC, you're entitled to certain amateur radio operating station privileges specific to the country that you're in. So if they may have a slightly different band plan, for example, here in the US, there are certain sections of the band, like the 20-meter band, that are only for voice and data, and others that are just for Morse code. they may have other band plans that are over in Germany or France, for example. So you definitely want to follow the other countries' specific operating privileges. But in general, for US license, FCC licensed amateur radio operators, you can go over there without an additional permit. I want to show you guys here's a second. And so I downloaded this from the ARRL website, and it is the notification that is that you would just need to carry with you if you're going to, for example, Germany or France or Spain. And it's in English, German, and one other, I think French. Let me switch back to the English, French, and German. And so it's just a three-page letter that you would just carry with you. And you would also then want to carry your actually, I don't have it on this page, but essentially your US license. And the FCC doesn't mail you out your license when you get licensed, but you can log into the FCC licensing system, the ULS. And when you log into your account, then you can actually print out an official copy of your license. But that's the key, is that you have to log in, because anybody can download anybody else's license, but it has a reference copy like pasted right across the front. So you want to make sure that you get the official copy that's pasted across there. So that's pretty easy. Again, you'll definitely want to check out the individual country that you're going to, making sure that they haven't like recently updated their agreement. But for the most part, the countries in the EU, you can go and operate from. And very similar operating in Central and South America. So it's covered under the International Amateur Radio Permit, or IARP. And this is another one of those where you don't have to get a, you don't have to take another test, or usually you don't have to pay another fee. But there are two classes of licenses that fall under the International Amateur Radio Permit. One of them is class 1, and that requires that you know Morse code. So in the past, in order to get your amateur radio license, with just 1 or 2 exceptions, you had to pass like a 5-word a minute test. And so if you either pass the test or you currently know Morse code, even just the most basic Morse code, then you would fall under class 1. As long as you hold the technician, general, advanced, or extra class licenses. You'll see that they have not issued a directive on what it means to know Morse code. So if you're asked, you may want to be able to demonstrate Morse code proficiency. It's kind of one of those gray areas where nobody really knows what that means. So if you don't know Morse code, though, then that would fall under the class 2. And then that is somewhat similar to how the US used to license amateur radio operators, that if you took your novice or your technician class license without Morse code, then you could add all operating privileges above 30 megahertz with just a few slices of frequencies down below 30 megahertz where you could actually operate Morse code only. So anyway, if you don't know Morse code, the IARP class 2 would be the one that you would want to apply for. The permit's valid for a whole year, except if your license expires before a year, then it would expire at the same time that your license expired. So if you want to obtain your International Amateur Radio Permit, you would just go to the ARRL website, the arrl.org/IARP. It has all the information, but it also, right in the middle of the page, is the application. So I think it's a 2 or 3 page application that you just print, fill out, sign, and send in. I do believe it's costs a little bit of money, but it's not too bad, like $10 or $20 in that range. So that would allow you then a year of having your international radio permit. Again, make sure you check the country, because some countries do require, for example, that you add the suffix, for example, slash, and then their geographic location, CE1, for example, to your call sign. And sometimes they'll have you during your conversation at one point, sometime during your conversation, they'll have you tell where you are over the air. For example, I'm 30 kilometers north of Peru or something like that. So the ARRL, they do a really good job of detailing out what the latest information is on the different countries. And I will share my web browser. So this is at arrl.org/reciprocal-permits. And if you just Google ARRL reciprocal permit, this is probably one of the first pages to come up. But they'll have all of the countries that are listed along with their prefix. So each person that's licensed in Albania, for example, starts with a ZA, and then they'll have information on that country. So if you wanted to visit Albania and take your amateur radio license, then they have right here some information. There's not a lot of information for all entities, but it'll give you, for example, the entity that's in charge of licensing amateur radio operators in that country. And you can call them, be prepared, of course, to speak the language that their national language, or have somebody that can help you with that. I'll stop right here. Any questions so far? Canada is probably the easiest place to operate from, just simply because we have that reciprocal operating permit. The other ones, like the European Union ones and the Central and South American countries, you just have a little bit of work to do. Hey, Jonah.
Yeah, so I had one question. Let's say we went somewhere particularly easy like Canada, and you just forgot part of the process, like, you didn't add the slash. Is it clear what penalties are for that? I know when we're dealing with the FCC, fines start really high, but especially for international stuff, how do you sort that out?
In general, I haven't heard of a lot of fines like from US citizens or US amateurs going up to Canada. I suspect that it's a lot like the US, because they share a lot of the similar licensing, technical study, things like that. So it's in the US here, it's pretty self-policing. So if you do have somebody that is using a United States call sign, and some amateur in Canada hears that, they just may ask you, hey,
Sure.
remember to use the slash and then the prefix for the geography that you're in. I seriously doubt that if you forgot it, that you would actually get any type of monetary fine or jail time or anything like that, because it really is more self-policing at this point. In the US, just kind of as a history, especially in the 50s, 60s, 70s, amateur radio was very much regulated by the FCC. They had listening stations all around the country. They had listening mobile vehicles. They would track amateurs down that were doing even just slight infractions, such as talking close to the band edge, and they would fine you a lot. That doesn't happen anymore. Pretty much to get the attention of the FCC, you would literally have to be jamming public service. The other one that they've been going after a lot is not amateur radio operators, but people that will start up their own FM broadcast station. And this happens a lot in LA, New York. That really is the best way to get FCC's attention, is to broadcast 300 or 400 watts as an FM radio station. They don't like that because they're used to getting money for those licenses. Good question, though. Cool. And I did want to put, it's not necessarily a foreign country, but operating from a cruise ship. It always sounded like fun to me. but it's not easy unless it's a cruise specifically designed for amateur radio operators. And there are several cruises that are put together by ham radio people for ham radio people. And those obviously, they would definitely be bringing radio gear on board, both HF, VHF. But if you're planning on just your typical Carnival Disney cruise, the things to keep in mind, you do need to get written permission from the cruise company before you bring your radio gear on the ship. Because if you don't, most likely what would happen was that as it's going through the X-ray, they just take it out, confiscate it, and then they give it back to you at the end of the cruise. Not really a useful thing to do. Now, if the ship is non-US registry, which most ships are not, then you have to obtain a reciprocal operating agreement or authorization from the country where the ship is registered. If it is a Central or South American registry or an EU registry, that may be very easy just through the licensing agreements that we looked at in the past couple of slides. But if it's some strange country that isn't part of the EU, isn't part of Central or South America, then you may have a tougher time doing that. But if you get past the first two hurdles, then you definitely have to get permission from the captain. And if you go on to the different websites, or you just Google like operating from a cruise ship, you'll hear stories from both sides. You'll hear, I tried to do it. It was impossible to get through to the cruise ship company, and they wouldn't allow me to bring it on, or I brought it on even after they said. To completely the other end, where somebody, made sure that they could bring it on board, that the cruise company did allow it. And when they asked permission from the captain's like, oh yeah, I'm an amateur radio operator too. Yes, you can operate, all you like. They'll probably have certain rules. So that's important to follow the crew instructions. When you place an antenna, you can't necessarily just drape it from your balcony or set it up on the Lido deck. But there are plenty of people who have successfully brought their smaller, hopefully, ham radio gear on board and made quite a few contacts on the high seas. One thing to keep in mind is that shipboard contacts, they don't count for almost all awards. So if you're looking to make contacts to count for an award, including DXCC, which is the DX Century Club, it's probably the most prized award in amateur radio. Cruise ship contacts don't count for that. So that's operating from a cruise ship. There was one other point I was going to mention. Oh, yes. So that is operating from a cruise ship, either that is in US territory or Canadian territory, or international waters. But when you're within about 12 miles, or depending on kind of where the country considers territorial water, then that's when you would need permission or a permit from the country where you are in their territorial water. So for example, if you're 10 miles, take it easy, Marilee. If you're 10 miles from Spain, then you would need to have a reciprocal operating agreement from Spain, for example. So that's just something to keep in mind. All right, so I thought of some tips in operating from another country. Google is definitely your friend. However, don't believe everything you read because it changes so often. If you go onto QRZ and you look at somebody that posted in 2018, oh, Carnival, they don't allow amateur radio gear on their ships at all. That actually changes back and forth, and it could change back and forth several times a year. One example I will show you is, and I've seen most people say that amateur radio gear is not allowed on Carnival. However, some people say, oh, we'll just go to their website. So here, this is at least their most current website under carnival.com/help. It says, what items am I not allowed to bring? And they go over a lot of prohibited items. But if you go down to exemptions and considerations, you can see that, let's see, ham radio and amateur radio equipment is exempted from their prohibited items. So it's kind of hard to tell. And the the best thing to do would be to call them, and hopefully you get somebody that knows what ham radio is. So yeah, definitely don't believe everything you read. Check the ARRL for information that reciprocal permit FAQ and just reciprocal permit website has a lot of information on it, even for the individual countries. Check stories from other hams who have recently operated outside the US, either on the website, or if you know somebody in a club that, for example, often goes to the Virgin Islands or another, France or Germany or someplace, ask them like what they did they operate, how did they do that? There are a lot of people that do post stories on like, this is exactly how you get your reciprocal permit for this particular country, and this is who you ask, and things like that. Contact an amateur radio club in the country that you're going to visit, because a lot of times they will be very familiar with people visiting from the US or Canada or other countries, and how to help them get an amateur radio permit if they need one. And then one thing that I would definitely consider is visiting hams or clubs in other countries and just using their equipment, because a lot of them are allowed to, let you use their equipment. Just like you guys as licensed amateur radio operators are allowed to, you can let your friends use your equipment, as long as you are at the control point being the control operator, and they would use your call sign. So that's perfectly acceptable. And it really can make a fun trip, because not only are you operating in another country, making contacts with all sorts of people that you may not make contact with normally, you also get to visit with a lot of the amateur radio operators and find out their stories, like how hard is it to get a license, how regulated is it, how does their country government feel about amateur radio operators, because there's all different stories. And then of course, finally, weigh the risk, reward, benefit, is it worth it kind of operating while visiting another country? If you're going on vacation, would you rather spend most of the time operating on your ham radio or, visiting the beach? And I'm not saying that there's any one right answer, but it's just something to consider. The one thing I did want to touch on is going beyond just getting a permit to operate temporarily from another country. It is possible to actually apply for your German amateur radio license that comes with a German call sign. And mainly it's for people who are going to be either visiting a country for more than 3 months or a year, or people that are moving to a different country, either part-time or full-time. So there's this thing called the Harmonized Amateur Radio Examination Certificate, and it's not a license, it's not an organization. It is basically a certificate that a country will issue another country saying, hey, this person was or is licensed in our country. So it mainly applies to European participating countries, and it allows amateurs to go from one European to another and obtain the full license and call sign issued by that country. This is not for visitors, vacationers, for operating temporarily. So if you're applying for a foreign operating permit and they request a copy of your HARC certification, you may have to explain the US doesn't participate in HARC, but that doesn't mean that they won't accept some type of certification that you are licensed in the US. So, and I'll give you an example of that. In Germany, if you want to move to Germany for months or years, then you can see this is this is not from an official German website, but they put this out here that you can actually, if you have a US amateur general class or above, or extra class, presumably also advanced class, even though it's not available anymore in the US, you would probably be considered a general class. But what you would have to do is get a copy of your identity card or passport. You print out an official copy of your amateur radio license and sign it. And then get a copy of the registration certificate from the German office. And then the one thing that they say, so it does cost €200. And then if you'll be asked for a HARC certificate, what you want to do is let them know that they have to do it manually. And I think that says it down here. Actually, I don't think it says it on this page, but essentially because the FCC doesn't issue HARC licenses or HARC certificates, just tell them that you are from the US so that then they know to go look up your amateur radio call sign on the FCC website or request some type of certificate from the FCC manually so that they understand, oh, okay, this is what they're asking for. So even though the US does not participate in this harmonized amateur radio examination certificate, they will work with the other country to get you the certificate that they're requiring. And I'll switch back to, cool. And that was really all I had for today's topic on operating in a foreign country. I have taken my amateur radio equipment to other countries. I just never really got the opportunity to use it. I really would say the best thing to do is contact other amateur radio operators, because if you go there expecting, you know, just to use their local repeaters on your handheld, you know, you may be listening to a lot of people speaking the national language and not really even understand like how to break in and kind of to spark up a conversation. But a lot of clubs will be more than happy to invite you to their meeting or even you know, meet with you personally and kind of, you know, either show you around the country or talk to you about amateur radio in their country. Cool. So that was all I had. Any questions on that? Or I'm just going to open it up to any amateur radio related questions at all. And while you're thinking of that, I will be right back. I just got to take something out of the oven. One question I have for you guys, did you get, you already got the cable for programming your Baofeng radios?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so with Baofeng radios, there are some programming cables that have counterfeit chips in them and some that have fully licensed chips. And they're, I'm trying to remember the name of the chip, but anyway, so it's fine to use a counterfeit chip. Unfortunately, the company that makes the chips, what they've done is to kind of prevent people from not being able to use counterfeit chips, but from easily being able to use them. A lot of the more recent Windows drivers don't recognize the counterfeit chips. So you may have to just go look for older drivers for the chip.
Gotcha. I think that makes sense. Is that I've heard about like prolific drivers and having to, gotcha. Understood. Yep.
So it's not too hard because I do have one that has a counterfeit chip in it. And so you just have to kind of roll back your driver to like the earlier version that doesn't have that issue with it. And then you just kind of have to prevent Windows from updating it, because once it updates, then it won't work again. And then you have to roll it back again. Yeah. So, and if you do get other radios in the future, you don't necessarily have to get like the official cable from Yaesu or Kenwood or ICOM or whatever it is that you buy. There's a couple of really good people either on eBay or there's another seller that sells like official chips and actually do support them. And they're not very expensive. They're, you know, in the $20 to $25 range. And I had his card here, but if you want information on that, I can easily send that to you.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, I
Yeah.
was wondering about that. Do most radios then, um, is it just going to be easier to program them in a computer rather than using the handheld interface?
Yes, even the FT60, just for fun one time, I programmed 20 channels into it. It
Mm,
took me, you know, 30, 40 minutes.
right.
It's just a lot of spinning the dial and punching the keys on the front. Um, and if you are doing like 50 frequencies, I would definitely, you know, get a cable for it because it's just going to be a lot easier, especially with Chirp. So Chirp works with almost every radio. Um, some people like Chirp, uh, number one, because it's free. Number two,
Right.
because it supports almost every radio out there.
Two good
But
things.
yeah, but there is another like paid one called RT Systems. I don't,
Mm,
have you guys heard of that?
mm-mm.
So this is like if you actually wanted to pay for your cable and the software used to program it, RT Systems, they sell cables and software, and usually they're somewhat radio specific, meaning that one cable might do like 3 or 4 different models of Yaesu. But
Oh,
for
sure.
example, if you're doing like a Yaesu mobile versus a Yaesu handheld, that would definitely be 2 different radios. So rtsystems.com, rtsystems.inc.com. And if you wanted to, for example, look at the Yaesu, and then you have to look at the specific model, uh, like a handheld. And so you can see how many that they have
Oh,
for,
sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
for all the models. So we're looking for FT60. So the FT60 is going to be different from the FT70D. And this is the one thing I don't like about uh, RT Systems is, yes, they're probably going to give you 100% satisfaction. But if you have 2 different radios, you're basically buying software and a cable for each one.
Right.
Plus, once you install it on one computer, it kind of locks it to that computer, and you have to ask permission to install it on another one, and it requires that you have the um, uh, security key for your specific one. And almost all of them are like $50 for the cable and the software, or you can buy just the software for 25 and just the cable for 30. But they don't, it's not like you can buy any cable. To use this, you have to buy this cable from them because the cables are locked to the software.
Gotcha. So if I was ever
So
going with one specific radio and I really just wanted to get the best of the best, this might be a good solution. But if I'm still early on, Chirp's probably the way to go.
I would definitely start with Chirp first because there are some people that have problems with Chirp, and
Mhm.
maybe it's because they're using Macintosh, or maybe it's just they're not very computer smart. But Chirp works, I would say, 99% of the time. But there are just a few people that just prefer to have like the paid version, and that's kind of how they operate. I was going to get you the, yes. So let me open this. This guy, he is on um, eBay.
Mhm.
And if you, so I bought a couple of cables from him. So it's Blue Max 49ers. And
Oh,
you can
cool. Look
just
that up.
search that on eBay. Um, I bought 2 cables from him recently, and I couldn't really figure out which ones that I needed. So I just emailed him, and he emailed me right back. These are the cables that you want. And so I just bought them, and they worked really well. There is another supplier, and I don't remember it right now, but I'll make sure and email that to you, or get it to you somehow. Um, they're pretty inexpensive. I think $20 to $25 per cable. And like I said, a lot of cables are interchangeable not necessarily like Baofeng to Yaesu, but like there's, if you have like different models of Yaesu, then you can usually use the same one for like all their handhelds, for example.
Gotcha, understood.
The other thing that you might want to look at is rather than, so you can always go to an online directory. So let me share my screen again. A couple of great directories are RepeaterBook. And if you just Google RepeaterBook, it'll be the first one that comes up. You can subscribe to them, or it's actually free if you just want to go look at like North American repeaters. There's just some limitations, like you can't filter on like a specific band. But let's just take a look at Oregon repeaters. And you don't get ads when you subscribe to. And 2 meters. And so here is a list of all the Oregon amateur radio repeaters in Oregon and kind of like what, where they are. And so you can sort them by location or frequency, and sorting may actually be, no, yeah, you can. And so if you do it by frequency, for example, then it's easy to find like the Mount Hood repeater is 147.12. And you can see that there's several 147.12. Well, there's 3 of them, but they're all different places.
Right.
In Baker County, Douglas County, Clackamas County is the one that I'm looking for. And so that's on Timberline Lodge. So you can get information from here, but Chirp is also able to connect to places like RepeaterBook, and you can download area specific repeaters.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that.
Yep. Yeah, so I think it's under file, and then you can actually load in different sources. The other place I would look at is the Portland Net. They're like the Portland CERT. They have a file that I think is and they're sometimes referred to as code plugs or frequency lists. And they're just all the information that you would need to then just throw into Chirp usually, and then upload to your radio. You may not need all the frequencies, but if you have the FT60 has 1,000 frequency channels that you can program, might as well program 500 in there.
Sure.
The Baofengs, they have 128 frequencies. So Portland Net also has a separate list that just has 128 frequencies, because they know a lot of people just have the limited number of channels available to Baofeng. And I apologize, I don't, let's see if we can just Google it. Sometimes so the ARO is amateur radio operator. And so here is a list of supplies and equipment. So opportunities. FRS and GMRS frequencies, that's not regional simplex subnets. Training clubs, forums. These are examples of things that I need to get on our website, or at least maybe get a frequency list for us. But it looks like, so they definitely have a list of simplex frequencies. So where was that? So this one right here, let's see if I can. Oh, this is going to be just a map. But I'll see if I can find it and send you that resource. So it is Portland specific. Where do you guys live?
We live in Portland, kind of in like the Pearl area, yeah.
So this would actually probably be really useful to you, just because in case of emergency, Portland Net is going to be one of the largest organizations that gets on the air and starts talking. If there's an earthquake or some type of major power outage or something like that, the best thing to do is just turn on the radio, because you'll hear a lot of talking back and forth between people, even if it's not like an official net. You'll hear people asking, hey, you know, my power's out. Is anybody else experiencing the same thing and stuff like that? So it's a neat way to get information really quickly. So I'll look for that and see if I can find it.
Yeah, that would be great. And that was actually something I was wondering about, because again, we haven't really made first contact yet outside of just our, you know, two radios
Yeah.
talking. So, you know, when we haven't gone out too much or gotten great sight lines, but we did try once from a park just later at night. And so I just had looked up a list of local repeaters and just tried one or two. And all I did, the only steps I know there are plugging in the offset, plugging in the like the tone, and then just going to the frequency,
Yeah.
and then just call sign monitoring.
Mhm.
And for the repeater or two that we dialed into, I just got a response back that sounded like Morse.
Yeah. So
I'm not sure what that is. Yeah.
yeah. So almost all even repeaters have to identify once every 10 minutes.
Mm.
So what'll end up happening is most repeaters, when you key up a repeater, it starts that 10-minute timer. And so after no communication, after 3, 4, 5 minutes, then it will automatically send out its identifier in Morse code. And it'll be silent. So if there's no activity after that, you won't hear anything. But if somebody else keys up the repeater again, then you'll hear that Morse code identifier. Some modern repeaters with more advanced controllers will actually say, you know, this is the, and then it'll give that call sign.
Sure.
Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of the best way to find other people to talk to. It's unfortunate, but in the last few decades, 2-meter repeaters especially have kind of seen a big decline. It used to be that in users, and it used to be that commute times, like the morning going to the office, the evening coming home from the office, there'd be a lot of people on talking to people in the area, as you know, just chit chat while they're driving, or you just listen while other people talk. There are a couple of larger networks. One of them is the WIN system, and I believe it's available here in Portland. And rather than just listening to one repeater that has, you know, a footprint of 100, 150 miles in circumference, you're actually connected to 100 to 1,000 different repeaters. So if you have, and I've never actually tried this, but let's take a look. I used to listen to this a lot down in California. It's a very active system.
And do you access it with your radio, or do you access it like through a digital gateway?
No, well, you can do both, but most people access it through just a repeater in the area that's then connected to the WIN system. So you can even go to their website and listen to the streaming audio. It looks like they have an audio player
cool.
where you can just stream looks like they do have a 20-second delay. But if we look here at somewhere here, they have a list of the repeaters. At least they used to. Oh, there we go, repeaters. A lot of them are in California. However, a lot of them are connected to other places. So it doesn't look like there's any here in Oregon. It looks like Seattle is probably the closest one. That's unfortunate. The other one is the
sorry, you cut out there for a sec. What was unfortunate?
That there's not repeaters up here that are connected to the WIN system.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, but there is the ARRLG, the Amateur Radio Relay Group, is a group that is really dedicated to just putting and maintaining repeaters on the air in the Portland area. And I think they actually may be wider than Portland. Yeah, they have Medford. They don't have any wind system connected repeaters. Not all the time, but sometimes these repeaters are connected to each other. So if you are listening to one repeater, you may actually be hearing people on many different repeaters. Then I would say that the third way to really broaden the number of people that you're talking to is that a lot of the repeaters, even this one here in Sylvan Hill, which is in the Portland metro area, so they have an Echolink and then they also have an IRLP connection. And so it looks like the IRLP is on 147.4 and the Echolink is on their 440, 442.225. So IRLP and Echolink are ways to connect repeaters to each other through the internet. And the reason that people do that is just if you're going to have a net that includes all the Pacific Northwest, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, then the net may connect 4, 5, 6 different repeaters all up together at once so that you have a broader area of people that are talking. And to be honest, I should know more about repeaters in the Portland area. I knew more about California Bay Area when I was down there. I think the repeater activity up here is a lot less than it is in the Bay Area in California. But it's no excuse. I should know more about it, but I would look at that. The other really interesting thing is hotspots. A lot of people, because if you listen to repeaters, you keep your radio on in the living room or kitchen and you just listen to them, they're pretty dead. Like it's once in a blue moon that you'll actually hear people on them. So people are using what are called hotspots. And that allows you to still talk through your radio to other people who have radios, but it goes through the internet. So you, there are many different manufacturers of these hotspots, but in general, kind of this is what they look like. You can even build your own with a Raspberry Pi. So this, I think, is one, the MMDVM is one that you can actually build yourself. However, it looks like somebody just put it in a box and is selling it on Amazon. But the nice thing about this is that, let's say that you have a digital radio for a Fusion digital radio or DRM, digital mobile radio, then you can use that radio on low power or extremely low power, like 0.5 watt, to talk to this box that's then in your house or in your RV or something connected to the internet. And it can be through Wi-Fi, and you can literally talk to just about anybody in the entire world. There's so many different channels and talk groups and things like that, and nets. They have technical nets and nets on just about any topic that you can think of. And this is one way to kind of access them, even if you don't live in a major metropolitan area that is serviced by a lot of digital radios. So I think we'll have, if I can find somebody to talk about this would be a great topic for one of the club meetings. I don't know of anybody in the club that's using one of these, but if I wish I had more time, because I would love to just build one of these. And then, yeah, because for less than $100, you can easily build one, have it in your house. Digital radio is a little bit more active just because you can reach a lot more people, because they typically connect a whole bunch of repeaters together. So, and they have different talk groups, like the North American talk group. If you were to talk on the North American talk group, you would be activating 400, 500 repeaters in the US as you're talking. And that literally thousands of people would be listening to you. And one cool way to find out like what topics people are talking about and what it's like without investing any money is to go to the Brandmeister site. And I think they used to call it the fire hose. There we go. Hose line. So Brandmeister is just a name of a type of protocol that a lot of the repeaters around the world use, but you can go to their hose line and it will list the most recent repeaters and the people that are talking on them.
Oh,
And so
that's
all you
cool.
have to do is just click on any one of these, and then you will be listening to that particular repeater.
That's super cool.
interesting.
Yeah, I would. So definitely just, check this out. See if it's something that you do like, because then you can figure out, do I want to invest any money in a digital radio before you even, buy any equipment. I enjoyed listening to the WinLink system, but sometimes it got a little bit old because topics of conversation weren't necessarily very interesting, and you had a lot of self-policing on there by people who literally seemed like they were in kindergarten. But it's all over the board, especially when you get into international talk groups. A lot of times those can be a lot more civil than a lot of the American talk groups.
And so what would you recommend for making first contact and just kind of getting things going initially? Is it just go in a repeater and kind of hold out until someone answers, or, in terms of like keeping things local, or is it best to just move straight into more digital stuff and try to kind of start expanding?
Either one, I think, is perfectly fine. I mean, if you wanted to, I have my radio here. We can make a first contact right now.
I don't know if our building would let us. We might have to go outside first.
Yeah, I would just get on the local repeater and just every once in a while, every half hour or so, just throw out your call sign and say monitoring. The other thing that I would do is just take a look at local nets that are happening. And let me just take a quick look at.
And I'm looking on repeater book for, okay, I'm seeing a lot of 70 centimeter repeaters.
I was going to see if they had like the ARRLG. So we have we used to, I need to put it back up on there, but oh, here we go. ARRLG from their homepage, so arrg.org, they have more and then local net list. And so here's the local nets that are happening daily on almost all nets with, I can't think of any exceptions, will allow people to check in, whether you're a member of that particular group or you're not. So this Areas District 1 net, I'm sure that they would allow call for visitor check-ins. And so here's the times, and it looks like it's daily from 7:30 to 8:05 p.m. And then they give you all the repeaters if they are going to be taking check-ins from where they are. It's also available through Echolink. So I would just pick up, if you're a Linux user, you might want to listen to that. Skywarn is for weather spotting and other weather enthusiasts. Portland Net happens every Sunday. That's an interesting net. It takes more time for everybody to check in than it does for them to actually talk about whatever topic that they're talking about. So I was the guest speaker last Sunday talking about hidden transmitters or transmitter hunting. It starts at 8:10, but check-ins last at least 25 minutes, and then they'll have the topic, and then they'll come back for visitor check-ins. So that's a good place to go to. There are also on Monday night at 7 o'clock, every Monday at 7 on, let's go to that. Down here, that we have our weekly net, yep, and it's on 14684.
And so for accessing things like that, or just for contacting people, how detrimental is it to be, let's say you were standing on a street in downtown with big buildings all around you. Would you want to clear those sight lines and get out somewhere more open, or is as long as you have, straight
It
up?
really depends on where the repeater is.
Okay.
So the one in downtown Portland, I think the 14704 repeater, you would have
Mm,
no problem hitting just because it's probably somewhere above your head. Um, the one that's on Mount Hood, 14712, depending on where you are, you may or may not have success in getting through. I would say in general, even in downtown Portland with buildings all around, you probably will have good success as long as it's like a repeater that covers that area. Obviously, you're not going to talk to a repeater in Salem from that location, but repeaters, because they're up on top of hills and because they have really, really nice antennas, usually you can contact them from just about anywhere in their path.
gotcha. Yeah, and I'm
Yep.
seeing that downtown antenna. Is that the let me grab it right here. Is that the Sylvan TV tower?
Mhm.
Gotcha.
Yep. Yeah, and even the club repeater, the 14684 repeater, is on top of Mount Scott, and I think it's like 300 feet up on the antenna, one of the antennas that they have up there. So it's really, really high, and it covers a really wide path. And that's the nice thing about repeaters, is that I would say that if you're driving around in a car, it's best to have a mag mount on the outside of your car, because your car makes a great Faraday cage, which is just, it's a device used to keep radio signals inside of itself. So even just a simple $25 mag mount antenna that you stick on your car is going to be 1,000% better than trying to use a handheld from inside your car, if that makes sense.
That does. Yeah, I'll note that down.
And the one that I frequently recommend is it's Diamond. Let me see what the model number is for that. They make bigger ones. So like this one is an example like of a bigger mag mount antenna, but in recent years, as magnets have become a lot stronger, you can actually make these just tiny ones. And let me go grab one because I just have it right here. So this is a mag mount antenna. I think it's about 18 inches tall, and I got to unwrap it. Somebody put a bunch of rubber bands on it, but it's hard to see. But yeah, so it's not very big, and even the base is like really small. So you could easily just stick this on your car, and then what I usually do is just put it through the door and then close the door on it carefully, like a rear driver, rear passenger door. You're really not going to hurt the coax. Maybe in 5 years you'll have to replace it if it gets too smushed, but especially because this coax is pretty thin. And even the thicker RG8X, you don't really hurt very much by, putting it like closing the car door on it. So the nice thing is you can also use this in your house, just next to your window. The only thing is you want to put it like on some type of a cookie sheet or like a longer ruler or something, because it's technically a mag mount. So this thing is one side of the antenna. The other side of the antenna is the ground plane. So it's usually the top of your car or the trunk of your car or something like that. But like I said, if you're in your house, a larger cookie sheet will actually work pretty well. And if you put that near your window, again, you're going to get a lot better signal going out than you would just from a rubber duck antenna. Because a rubber duck antenna, I mean, they're convenience, they're convenient. But the problem is that they're probably one of the worst antennas that you can use. So
Right, gotcha.
Yeah.
So trade-off.
Yeah. Yeah. And unfortunately, it's never been fashionable to, like walk around like this. It would be so much better though. You get,
One day.
yes, exactly.
Can make it
Much
happen.
better reception. Yeah. So that one, let me, I think these are like $26 at Ham Radio Outlet. And let me see if I can find it. There it is. So there's two different models and they're both $27. One comes with a reverse SMA connector, and that would be for the Ocean or the Baofeng. And the other one comes with an SMA connector, and that would be for like the Yaesu, ICOM, Kenwood. And so this particular one is the reverse connector. And so this is what you would use for the radios that you have now. You can buy either one of them and just get an adapter. But if you only have the Baofeng, then you would get this one. If you're planning on getting the like a Yaesu radio, then get this one here and use an adapter for converting it to your Baofeng if you wanted to do that.
Gotcha.
Gotcha.
I think I have one or two other questions for you.
Yeah.
So I know we were looking at, resources for ham radio stuff, and one that came up was the RL handbook. Is that something?
Yes.
I know that runs about $50,
Yeah.
almost regardless of the year you get it. Would you recommend getting that as a resource?
If you have the money, they don't. So they're published every year. They don't change that much year to year. Every 5 years or so, they may make major changes to it. If you can pick one up that's a 1999 or I'm sorry, not a 2000, 2019, 2018, 2017, those will work just fine. But if you want the latest and greatest and you just absolutely have to have the most recent version, then yeah, it's a great resource. But like I said, they're the same a lot year to year with minor changes. So I even have a 2018 that you can have if you want.
That would be awesome. Yeah,
Yep.
if it's cheaper than $50, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, and you'll find that a lot of people will practically be giving them away at Hamfests and ham fairs, and not only that, but just other resources at reference books and things like that.
Is that just because people might get the newest versions for themselves, and so then suddenly you have a 2018 and
Yep.
why
Yep.
have two?
Or you the longer you are in ham radio, the more stuff you will collect, either free or low cost, or people will give
Sure.
it to you.
Yeah.
I think I have about 5 or 6 handbooks. So I certainly do not need more than one.
Gotcha.
Gotcha.
Yep.
And then and not to just always ask questions like, how do I not get arrested? Because that isn't too much of a worry for me.
Yeah.
But what's a good way to learn the bands to avoid? Just whether it's, dipping down into the really low edges of a band where that's reserved, or do you just program out your radios so that you aren't just kind of free tuning to those?
So Baofeng is an exception. So Baofeng and a lot of the Chinese import radios, they will allow you to transmit on just about any frequency that they receive. So obviously you don't want to program your radio for a police channel and then forget, I shouldn't be transmitting on this.
Right.
Almost all of the official ham radio brands, ICOM, Yaesu, Kenwood, Alinco, they only transmit on ham radio frequencies. Even if they're wide receive and they receive like a whole bunch of frequencies, your Yaesu FT60 will only transmit on amateur bands. So that helps a lot. And that's the same with almost all HF radios. They limit their transmitting to just the ham bands. If you don't have an extra license, though, if you do have an extra license, it's really cool because you don't have to worry about anything. If you don't have an extra license, though, let's say you only have your general license, then you want to make sure that you are in the general portion of the band. Right. The ARRL makes a great band plan that you can easily print out. And if you just search ARRL band plan, and I think it's actually not called a band plan, it's called something else. But you, let's see. So it's not the first. So this is the color chart that is 11 by 17, but frequency band chart.
Mm.
And I'm trying to find the page that has it like in the different black and white. And as soon as I find it, I can put it in chat for you, but I can't find it. There we go. Okay, so if you go here, there's different formats. There's 8.5 by 11 grayscale, black and white, and color.
Oh, cool.
And I would just print this out. And if you have a color printer, this one right here, the 8.5 by 11 color, will show you exactly like which frequencies that you can transmit on, and generally like which ones, what's allowed. So, and realize this is national band plan. So nationally, between 144.0 and 144.1, that's really reserved for CW. And it's CW weak signal. So it's mostly people using simplex try to contact other people using simplex. Once you get down below 50 megahertz, so if you're going 10 meters, 12 meters, 15 meters, you'll see this. Most of the operating privileges are for EAG, which is extra advanced and general. So the novice and technician here, so you do get some privileges on 10 meters. So you get some digital, which means RTTY and data. And you also get some voice up here in the yellow. And this is actually really a wide or a big chunk of frequencies because the 10-meter band is huge. Unfortunately, during this particular solar cycle, the 10-meter band isn't very, there's not a lot of people on it. There's some local stuff, but the sun's cycle kind of has to be on the upswing or near the top in order for 10 meters to be useful. The really useful bands right now, the really popular ones, are 20 meters and 40 meters. So unfortunately, the novice and technician, you only have privileges on 40 meters and it's only Morse code.
Gotcha.
So yeah, if you want to operate HF radio, the best thing to do is to get your general license, because that gives you almost like a huge chunk of the bands, if not in the entire band. So for example, general, you can operate all of 160. You can operate a lot of the 40-meter band chunk or section. So that's kind of, anyway, that's kind of a basic, like this is where you can operate. So if you're looking for like what, for example, on the 2-meter band, right? So between 144.1 and 148, it says, you know, that everybody can basically operate both data and RTTY and phone and image, but every regional area then has a band plan. And so Oregon has, I'm remembering from, it's the Oregon ORC. Let's see if I can, yep, the Oregon Regional Relay Council. Not a lot of people like either know or care about looking up the individual band plans. And they're mainly for the upper, like above 6 meters, because below 6 meters is pretty much national band plan, right? Because it's a national or international frequencies on HF, but VHF, UHF, microwave, they're all very, very regional because they're very local communications. So if you look up here in band plans and you want to look up the 2-meter band plan, then it's pretty small. Let's see if I can blow it up a little bit. You can see that, for example, you have repeater inputs between these frequencies and repeater outputs between these frequencies. You have APRS on 144.39. Most people don't dig down this far into like the band plan, really what you want to know is like, what simplex frequencies can I use and what repeater frequencies can I use?
Right.
So your simplex frequencies are between 146.42 and 146.60 with 20 kilohertz channel spacing. So that means that 146.42, 146.44, .46, .48, these are all your common and standard simplex frequencies. So that's one big chunk right there. The other big chunk of simplex frequencies is right here, 147.4, 147.42, .44, .46. And then up at the very top portion of this particular chunk of frequencies are going to be your really popular simplex frequencies. 147.52 is the national simplex calling frequency. So if you wanted to, like if you picked any frequency that to listen to for any activity or try to make a contact with people that you don't know, 147.52 is the frequency that you want to pick. And if you're going on a trip, like cross country or something, that would be a good frequency to listen to, because for those who are operating simplex, that's the first frequency that they would use as the national calling frequency. But the other really popular ones are just the ones above 146.52. So .54, .56, .58, those are the popular ones. The idea with the national calling frequency is you don't necessarily want to just sit on it all day and talk, for hours. You
Right.
want to kind of make contact and then move off the band. And so you could easily just make contact with somebody and then move up to 147.54 or .56. So so this is like where you can find, and I can plug this into the chat if you ever want to peruse like the actual band plan. But for most people, just knowing your simplex frequencies, like the common ones, and then knowing the repeater frequencies, the input, output, and PL tone is good enough.
Gotcha. Super cool. One other, Sid, I don't know if you have any questions. This is just one thing I was curious about while I was looking at this. I noticed your call sign. I'm assuming it's a vanity call sign, the K2 MAX.
Yep.
What are the rules for vanity call signs between different classes of licenses? Like, I'm assuming, besides the fact that you have it, I literally couldn't get K2 MAX because I have a technician's class license. I don't know if that would be allowable.
Yeah, so as a technician, you can get, so you have what's called a 2x3, because it's 2 letters, a number followed by 3. So it's a 2x3. Then I have a 1x3. So it's 1 letter, a number, and then 3 letters. So as a technician, you can get any, I should say almost, because there are like K2 SEX is probably not allowed.
Sure. Might get in trouble, yep.
Yeah, they won't issue you that. However, you can either get a 2x3 or a 1x3, and any of them. So as a technician, if you want to get a, so the next one up from there is a 2x2. And that is reserved for people that have advanced and extra. You can't get advanced anymore. So if you wanted a 2x2, then you would have to get an extra. So AA7PB is a 2x2. And then finally, the last one is a 1x2 or a 2x1. So for example, K2CT is a 1x2 and NT7T is a 2x1. And so essentially you would have to get an extra class license to get either of those.
Gotcha. So theoretically, as a technician, I could do, K7 ABC.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Yep. So a really good website for looking up, there's a site dedicated to vanity call signs. is yeah, and I always forget that. I just Google amateur tools. And here, so it's the AE7Q.com. And if you let's
That's
see.
cool that the first result for amateur tools, which is such a general thing, is ham radio related. That's
Yeah.
super cool.
And up in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see that there's application notes, explanatory notes, other tools main page, and then query tools main page is the one that you want.
Mm.
And then this one will tell you, this chart right here is a list of the number of 1x2s and 2x1s that are available by call sign region. So in the 7 land, which is where we are, there are currently none available. A big surprise. There's 1 pending application, and there are 130 that are expired for 2 years or less than 2 years, 52 that are canceled for less than 2 years. And the deal is that if, for example, let's say that you had a call sign, you passed away, and nobody told anybody, the FCC, that you passed away, then your license would expire, but then you have to wait 2 years and 1 day as another person to apply for that call sign. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
There's an exception that if you can find the obituary of that person that died, then you can send that to the FCC and say, hey, this guy is no longer alive. I'd like to apply for the call sign. But most people don't necessarily have access to that information. So you essentially just have to wait for these things to become available. And so you can see, like in 8 land, there are 5 that are currently available. And the way that getting a vanity call sign works is that it's a lottery system. So like, let's say tomorrow, this particular call sign is expired for 2 years and 1 day, the 1 day being tomorrow, then you would apply for that call sign. And let's say 5 other people applied for the same call sign on the same day, then all 6 people would be put into a lottery, and they pick out 1 winner, and then they award that call sign to the winner. So that way, if you're applying for a vanity call sign, you may want to research what call signs are coming up for that are canceled 2 years or expired 2 years plus a day. And then you may want to apply for more than 1 call sign, so that if you don't get that one, then you'll get another one that you happen to like. And if you just click on any of these buttons, like for example, in 8 land, it'll actually tell you which call signs are coming up. Yeah, so if you scroll down,
Oh, interesting.
you can see that it'll give you the end date and what date it's available. And so you can look down here and see all these call signs that are coming available. And one of these, let's see. So, okay, so the green ones. Oh, so phonetic is for Morse code. A lot of people like call signs that are easy to pound out in Morse code. Right. And so, yeah, so then the phonetic weight will give you the approximate weight of that call sign in Morse code.
That's cool.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Actually, I should say the phonetic weight is for voice, and then Morse code weight is for Morse. So if you look for something that is a low number, and I think phonetic weight just has to do with the like Alpha Bravo Charlie, Delta Echo. And they have a definition here if you click on it. But if I scroll down, I can see that NK8J right here is available 2/13/2021, which is odd because these 1x2s and 2x1s, they go very quickly. Like especially the popular ones. NK8J is probably not a very popular one just because it's not only hard to say, but it's the J is a pretty long character in Morse code, so it's probably not very desirable.
Yeah, you're telling that to Jonah, who's KJ7 what is it, ZVC?
Yeah, that's
forcing me to learn phonetic alphabet or just get a vanity.
Yeah, in Morse code, that's not a pretty call sign.
No, it's not good either in Morse.
That's funny. Yeah, so I would definitely go research, because this is like the definitive site for looking at getting a vanity call sign, because it'll not only explain the entire process to you, but it also gives you a pretty good indication of like what call signs are coming up and when and how to apply for them.
Gotcha. And if one doesn't currently exist, but it's not a 1x2 or a 2x1, it's just, if I, for some reason I wanted, KJLWP, chances are that one's open. And then would that just be more of a straightforward apply for it because that's not in particular high demand?
So what their FCC is doing right now is that they're issuing call signs consecutively. So the person that got issued the call sign after you would be ZVD. So you can't get any that are not issued yet. At least I don't think so. At least it's and realize this is from 15, 20 years ago when I got my call sign.
Sure.
I don't think that you can get ones that are not issued because then that would break their sequence. Right.
Oh, so
So
MAX was issued and then, so
Exactly.
did they go 5 and then 6? So, all combinations of MAX, Y.
Yeah, because the K2 and then any 3-digit after that has already been issued, but but in the 2x3s, so we are now on KI, and there are some websites that will tell you what the last issued call sign of the day, and this may be one of them, but I think we're up to KI. No, we're so definitely KJ, and it looks like we're nearing the end of KJ. Oh, I know people that have KK though. I think
Yeah.
KL they're going to skip because I believe that's Alaska. So KM is probably going to be the next one. So you wouldn't be able to get anything like KM. But if you're looking for something, you probably want a 1x3. I wouldn't think that you'd want a 2x3.
Right.
So 1x3s are a lot easier to get and they're a lot more available. And let's see.
Yeah, I was thinking like if you wanted, KJ SYD, for example.
Yes. Yeah. And so all you have to do is up here where it says, search by call sign. So K, what was it?
Like KJ SYD for Sid.
Yeah. Or even K7 SYD. Let's see what that brings
K7,
up.
of course. Right.
So it's canceled, but it's not yet available. So realize that the other thing is that their American call signs, or I should say, United States call signs are A, K, N, and W. So you could get W7 SYD. So we could search for that.
And what does it mean that it's canceled but not available, just to clarify?
So it's probably, let's see what that means.
Because I know, I would imagine for expired, right, you have that 2-year grace period. I don't know if for canceled, it's the same deal.
Yeah, I'm trying to, let's see. I believe that the deal is that they, even if you find out that the person passed away, if you're not like a family member, like an aunt, uncle, a mom or dad or son or whatever, they still there's a 2-year window where people that were related can apply for the call sign. So even if the FCC knows that they passed away, you still can't apply for it until 2 years plus 1 day.
Right. Parents, things like that, they just get, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So if we, let's see. So what about, sorry, it keeps opening up this. Where'd it go? There. So W7SYD. So that's active. So it's somebody has it. So A starts with like, is for the 2x2s and 1x2s and 2x1s. So that's not available, but N is, and I don't think we checked that yet, right?
Right.
So unfortunately, yeah, they have, somebody has it. So you could check 2x1s, so like KA. So it looks like KA7SYD is not active because looks like it expired in 94. So the other place that I would just check is the FCC. And I just Google
Oh,
FCC
right.
ULS lookup.
And then just do a license search to make sure.
Right.
Sure.
And when you get assigned a call sign, is that the same one that you have forever unless you like reapply? So like even if you get your general or extra license, it's still going to be the same one.
So the answer is yes, unless you specifically request a new call sign. So as a an extra, you are allowed to have a 2x2 or a 1x2 or 2x1. Now they aren't going to issue you a 2x1 or 1x2 because there's no more available. Like,
Right.
But I think that there are 2x2s. So if you wanted a 2x2, when you take the test, you just tell them I want a new call sign, and they automatically give you the next sequential one. But yes, unless you do that, then you still have the same call sign that you had before. The only way to change it then would be through the vanity call sign system.
And can you
So
change? Sorry, can you change multiple times? Do people
yes,
hop call signs? Okay.
yeah, and there are people that for whatever reason they don't they're not satisfied. So
Right.
somebody made a comment as somebody like announced that they had a new call sign. It's like, oh, another one. So there's nothing wrong with changing your call sign. You do want to do it earlier than later because people know you as your call sign. Your call sign is kind of like your name, especially when you start making contacts with people, you know, because that's the QSL card that you get printed up. That's the log, you know, the call sign in your logbook. So this is the right time definitely to be looking for vanity call signs. There's nothing wrong with changing your call sign. It's just most people, they find one they like and they kind of stick with it.
Yeah.
Unless, like, the only exception I can think of is, let's say you're a general for a long time, or you're a technician for a long time, and finally you get your extra class license, and you're like, I'm going to get a 1x2 or a 2x1, and you just keep looking, yeah, and you finally find one. Yeah, perfectly acceptable.
Gotcha.
Yep. Yeah, so I got mine in 2000 or about 2000, I think. And I think it was K2 and K9 MAX were both available. So I just kind of picked one, K2. K7 was not available. It probably won't be available for a very long time. It does kind of confuse people. So I would suggest that if you do look for another vanity call sign, try to get one that's a 7 unless you think you're going to be moving over to the East Coast sometime soon. A lot of people,
that determines your region.
It does. Yeah. And it used to be that if you moved to, for example, New York, you had to change to their call sign. So you had to get a new call sign. That's not the case anymore. However, people still are like, oh, K2MAX, what part of New York are you from? Well, not from New York. It's called a vanity call sign. Yeah. Yeah, but it also helps, even especially doing HF radio. I had this experience once where I was trying to make a contact on voice, and the ham radio guy that I made a contact with, just like right after I contacted him, he's like, oh, let me swing the beam around. Like he thought I was in New York. Oh. Yeah. Never heard from him again because like he turned his antenna completely away from me in California.
Oh no.
Yep. And the other great reason to get a vanity call sign now is that probably in 3 to 6 months, they'll actually be charging an extra $35 to do it, whereas right now it's free.
Oh, interesting. Gotcha.
Yep.
That's cool. I wasn't expecting this to be a big part of my my ham experience, but now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, you know, Max is a cool call sign.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always helpful, especially, you know, you guys have pretty cool call signs, and a lot of people they do make some, you know, acronym out of it, but it's always nice to have like your abbreviation or one that you really like. And since they're giving you the option of getting a vanity call sign and you find one you like, I would say go for it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
I love it. And I know we have to actually unfortunately hop off a little bit ago. But this is fantastic. And so every week is the beginner, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep. Yeah. So feel free to join anytime. And then if you have any questions like this, I'd be more than happy to tell you, give you an answer in my limited experience. I don't know everything, but I can definitely help you where
I I don't
I
know
know
how much,
something.
I don't know how many questions we'll have as beginners that will just,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and like to be clear, he's talked most of the time. That's just because we have all of the exact same questions.
Yeah. That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and feel free to email me anytime you have questions. I'll try to answer as best I can. Otherwise, meetings, the social meetups that are coming up are a great place. You ask a ham a question, and they, depending on how many hams there are, you will get, 10 hams will give you 12 answers.
perfect.
So.
That's exactly what I'm looking for.
Yep.
And I'll send you an email to figure out possibly getting that book from you, because I'd love to have that
Yes.
as a reference.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
Oh, one last thing. Are you guys ARRL members?
I don't
No.
think so. Not unless they would have
Okay.
automatically. That's a paid membership, right?
It is. Yeah. It's, I think, $49 a year. They do, if you both wanted to become a member, they do have a household, membership. You just receive one magazine. I highly recommend them, not just because it's a good thing to do. It's the national organization for amateur radio, and they do a lot of stuff good for amateur radio, but because you get all four of their publications. QST is one of them, which is a superb publication. They just started publishing another one called On the Air. And as members, you now get all four publications available to you, plus all the back issues for the last 10 years online. So you can get it on your phone, on your tablet, on your computer, and it's a great magazine.
That's awesome.
That's
So,
really
yeah,
cool. Yeah, we'll
highly
look into that.
recommend it.
I think we'll also probably get a membership for this. I would assume tonight if the form goes through.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I tested it, so it should. But let me know if you have any problems.
Perfect. Well, it was a pleasure.
Cool.
We'll see you next week, and
Yeah.
and possibly sooner if I can get my Baofeng programmed.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. Take care.
Yeah,
Take
you
care. See
too.
ya.
All right. Bye.